You're listening to Sense and Sustainability. This is the podcast series for everything to do with sustainable supply chains. Welcome, everybody, to our podcast series, Sense and Sustainability, where we try to get behind the characters, the people that have been involved in sustainable procurement for many years, to understand how they got to where they got to, why they got to where they got to, and then what they're doing now and how they see the future in sustainable procurement. So I'm delighted to welcome my old friend and colleague, Luca Guzzabocca from Italy. I hope I pronounced that correctly, Luca. I usually get it wrong. To talk to us about your life and your career.
Yes, first of all, Sean, thank you very much for your invitation. I'm very proud of it because, of course, we have been in contact since many years ago, and I'm very happy to share with you something about my experience and life career. So as you know, of course, I have almost 27 years of experience in procurement management. So I started in a small company. Actually, I started as a designer of electronic systems, something like that. I don't know if it is the right, translation in English, because of course I am graduated as electronics technician or something like that. And so the first company I joined was for this kind of job. And that, of course, my boss, after a couple of years, asked me if I wanted to join the design department, the research and development department, or the procurement department. Actually, at that time, I was alone. I was the procurement department. I was a single person because this company was very small, almost 15 employees. And, because of my way of manage the relationship, with people, I prefer to join the procurement function. And from that time, so I started to work in procurement organization. After this kind of experience, in which I procured, any kind of electronic components, sub-assemblies, external services to assembly, printed circuit boards, and such kind of things. It was that company, in the market of the electrical and electronic appliances. After that, I joined other companies. Actually, my career has been shared in 7 companies, different kind of size, different kind of market. I started from electronics, and then I went through, electrical and electronic appliances for residential and civil application. Then I started to work for multinational companies like Black & Decker Power Tools and GlaxoSmithKline, 2 different markets. The first is the households or the do-it-yourself power tools. The second in the pharma industry. So that's briefly my career in terms of procurement management.
So, Luca, what did you learn throughout that long career in procurement? What's your philosophy around what makes a procurement person successful?
Actually, because I have a lot of experience in procurement, to be frank, I started as all the buyers started. So I was a macho buyer, which means for me just the cost-saving objective as first priority. So squeeze supplier, squeeze all the quotation for suppliers in that time. So at the beginning was this, maybe today is still the same for...
we all started that way in procurement, didn't we?
Exactly. To be frank, I'm talking about my life. And then through the years of my careers, I changed the approach, even because working in small company is different than a big multinational company, where maybe, aspect like the quality, the partnership with suppliers, the service for suppliers, the innovation side, working with suppliers, they are more, popular and more familiar in the multinational company than in the small companies. No? So, and when I embraced the multinational company, so I changed my view, and I started to work not only for the cost saving objective, but for other kind of objectives. And that's my experience. So I used to say I changed it from the macho buyer to a smart buyer, where of course the buyer doesn't look only at the savings and the cost reduction objective, but also other kind of aspect which can bring a real value to the company and to the procurement professionalism as well.
So Luca, we first met, I think, when you were at GSK, and you'd started a not-for-profit in Italy around sustainable procurement about the same time as I started my business in the UK, Action Sustainability. What made you do that?
Actually, yes, I remember very well our first meeting in London a few years ago. And yes, Acquisti Sostenibilità, which was the not-for-profit organization you are talking about, has been established 1 year after your Action Sustainability. I remember very well. So, and well, I started to be passionate of sustainable procurement early 2000. And then when I met Angelo, who is my mate in the Acquisti Sostenibilità, wish and dream. So we established this not-for-profit organization in order to inspire people, inspire buyers across Italy, inform them, train them, and just to bring on the table of discussion the sustainable management of procurement. This actually came from, my experience that, of course, cost saving was not the only one objective of procurement, or shouldn't be the only one objective of cost reduction. And I started to look at, first of all, the website information. So I navigated a lot across the website, and even, of course, I found Action Sustainability in that time, as other kind of organization of activities around the world in terms of sustainable procurement. And so I was convinced that procurement can have really a very significant, activity in order to change the way to manage procure in a more sustainable way. So, the number of suppliers, the power you have in your hands when you have to select suppliers and products and services, and such kind of things, it made me really very, very conscious about the fact that procurement can make the difference. Yeah.
So you moved from GSK into the financial services sector. How was that for you? What was the transition like? Because I think you weren't just looking after procurement then, you looked after IT as well, as I remember correctly.
Well, actually, as I mentioned before, I had 7 experiences in 7 different companies, size, geography, and market. GSK was one of my, gap in the procurement management context, because before I used to work only for manufacturing companies. GSK is a manufacturing company, but I used to be in charge of indirect and services, procurement. So this was another big gap for me, because I changed from, manage procurement in the manufacturing side, so bill of materials, raw materials, components, and blah, blah, blah. And then in GSK, I changed it in managing services, indirect materials. This is another gap. The second gap was, between the pharma industry and the banking industry. And that's another big difference, because I needed to change my approach, because of course the financial system is different in terms of procurement management. In that time, it was the 2008, so even a time in which the financial system was in crisis, of course. And so they recruited me because they wanted to put inside their processes a new way to manage procurement, so a more let me say aggressive or more different a way to manage procurement, coming from a very mature system of procure goods and services. Yes, I expanded my role, because in Montepaschi Group, which is the bank where I used to work, I was in charge of procurement, logistics, health and safety, and security. So actually, it was the highest level of responsibility in my career, because I used to manage approximately 1.4 billion of euro per year of purchasing turnover, 150 employees under my responsibility in my organization, and more than 3,000 branch offices of the banks across Italy. So it was actually a very exciting time for me.
Big job. So then you decided to pack it all in and start a not-for-profit business, Right Hub. What made you do that? And tell us a little more about it, Luca.
Yes, someone said that I was crazy in that time because I left, my last position in Montepaschi when I was 50. And so joking, I used to say that I wanted to do something different for the following 50 years. Okay. So, but well, joking apart, so I was interested in the fact that before a very long career in management, in procurement management, and with my passion for sustainability, it was the right time to say, okay, I want to match my management, skill with my passion for sustainability. And so I established my own company, which is called Right Hub, in end of 2014. And so that's how it happened. I mean, yeah.
It was similar for me, actually. I was 49 when I started Action Sustainability. I guess, yeah, you do come to that point in your career, in very large corporates for most of my career, where you go, actually, yeah, there must be something different out there, and maybe a bit of a desire to put something back as well. So tell us about Right Hub, Luca. Tell us about what you do now.
Yeah, Right Hub is a small company. It is a consultancy services company, and specifically our services are in four key areas. The first one is sustainable procurement and sustainable supply chain. What we are talking about, actually, I don't think that I have to describe better what it means, but if you want, I can go in details. The second area is something very new for the Italian market, which is social procurement and supply diversity. So we introduced this kind of service coming from my experience in the Anglo-American companies, where the diversity is something very usual. And specifically in, if you look at the supplier base, no? So it means that in Italy, we applied the social procurement and supply diversity when we talk about supply from social cooperatives or social enterprises. So the not-for-profit organization, which can, supply goods and services and include people with disabilities or anyway, fragile people, disadvantaged people. That's one of the second area of our services. The third one is the one related to the design and execution of sustainable management for events. So we introduced this kind of service based also on the ISO 21221 standard, which is the event sustainable management standard. And in that case, of course, we design and execute the sustainable management of events, of location for events, organizers of events, suppliers of goods and services for events. And because we have a very, niche of business in the motorsport, also racing teams can be, certified according to the standard. The last one, but not the least, is the work inclusion of people with disability. As I mentioned before, we work with the social cooperatives, which are very well, popular in Italy, and maybe in Europe. Italy has been the first nation to establish a social cooperative system, let me say. And what we do is to work with the Italian companies which need to be in compliance with the mandatory Italian law to include people with disability from 15 employees up, in order to make a sort of agreement which allows to buy from a social cooperatives, which includes the people with disability, and supply goods or services to the company which need to be in compliance. So this is allowed by the Italian law, and we have many projects because of course the company don't have to hire the people with disability, but they can procure goods and services from a social cooperatives which hires the people with disability.
So that's actually law in Italy, Luca. It's not just like a public sector thing. Private businesses need to do this as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's basically for both kind of sectors, the public and the private sector as well, because there are many difficulties to hire people with disabilities. Sometimes there are very, pragmatic difficulties because of the layout of the space, manufacturing site, for instance, and so on. In some cases, there is a question of it's a matter of competence and skills across the people with disabilities area. There are difficulties to find people with the proper competence. For instance, we work for IT companies. They usually hire engineers, IT engineers, and it's difficult to find a large number of people in the disabilities scenario, let me say. Yeah.
So are businesses just doing this because they have to by law, or are some of your clients starting to see benefits of working more closely with disabled people?
Well, actually, we try to sell this kind of services and opportunity for people as an opportunity. So we don't care about the fact that we are directly in compliance with the law, but we suggest the company to take the chance and the opportunity to leave this kind of activity with a CSR approach or with a social impact approach, and we try to sell or to suggest the company to see also this kind of side of the law, let me say. Yeah. No, in fact, what I would like to add, maybe it's more important, the fact that, for instance, a couple of months ago, we launched, let me say, a product called Right in which we match the sustainability objective with the inclusion objective. So we propose the companies which want to be in compliance with the law to take the opportunity to add a sustainability project, for instance, trees plantation or refurbishment of a urban area or other kind of projects which are strictly related to the sustainable development objectives.
Okay, so you're bringing kind of environmental sustainability into that piece, so it's not just
exactly. So we match the social impact which comes from the inclusion of people with disability, and then the service is, for instance, maintain an urban area very clean with the trees plantation, with gardening. I mean, there is really a very good mix between the impact from social point of view and from the environmental point of view.
So tell us more about MotoGP. Sounds very glamorous. Some people might say it's quite a wasteful thing to do and maybe not the most sustainable thing. What are you doing to help the industry to be more sustainable?
Well, when we talk about motorsport, of course, it seems it is a paradox. I mean, because people think that, noise pollution or, fuels or engines, so they are just not respectful of the environmental and all of the events. But actually, if you look at, the numbers, the statistics, I mean, the number of bikes or the number of cars racing in a circuit are really have really an impact very, very low in comparison with the overall impact of the event. So when we started in 2014, of course, we have been as Martians in working in that kind of industry. But step by step and year by year, we convinced the organizer as well as the teams, which was very, very difficult in that time, the beginning, to embrace all our activities, and even all the spectators coming to see a race. We have started to involve them in many activities with gaming and such kind of things. Today, I have to be frank that in the last couple of years, the motorsport industry really is making a very big step towards sustainable management. Even because the international federations of motorcycling and automobilism are doing a good job. They implemented the sustainable management strategy last couple of years, so they declared objectives. So I mean, the world of motorsport is changing quickly and rapidly. Yeah.
So for you, it's about the event. It's about how people get there and what they do when they get there.
Yes, actually,
to the actual racing. Yeah.
Exactly. It is the overall event, but not only event. As I said before, we look after also the circuit, infrastructure. For instance, I don't know. We look at the fact that circuits procure energy from renewable energy, facilities, or for instance, the mobility. How you can reach the circuit with sustainable mobility, public transportation or carpooling and so on. We look at the waste management and circular economy of the materials disposed during the event. We look at the stop food waste. We have a program in order to collect the surplus of food, because look at the MotoGP event, for instance, we have more than 30 different points of restoration in the food and beverage, restaurants or hospitalities. So it's a huge amount of guests and a huge amount of food and beverage, cooked or not cooked. And at the end of the weekend, of course, so there is the need to, collect the food surplus in order to, to give to the people in need around the community and the territory where the event is hosted.
So, Luca, as you mentioned, another part of your business is sustainable procurement. So I guess we ought to talk a little more about that. Yeah. How are you seeing, I mean, you've been working in sustainable procurement in Italy for, I guess, 14, 15 years now. How are you seeing the progress of sustainable procurement in Italy, maybe compared to other parts of the world?
But actually, in Italy, the progress is very slow, to be frank, because, as you said, I have been working in this kind of sector for many years. And yes, today we can state that the awareness about sustainable procurement is increased respect 10 years ago. But in terms of real and concrete projects, I still see a very slow progress, very slow motion about the companies. Maybe one of the reasons is the fact that in Italy specifically, but I don't think it is different in other countries, the 90% or 99% of the companies are small and medium enterprises. They are, they are very maybe reluctant to start a real re-engineering of the process. And this makes things more difficult. This doesn't mean that there are some companies which are working, and I hope that the activities of big companies and multinational companies can change also the small companies, the medium companies in their approach to a sustainable management or their engineering of their procurement processes.
Yeah, I guess like you, I tend to see, although in many countries in the world, the majority of businesses are small businesses, but the influential ones tend to be the larger ones. And I kind of always think that, if we can exert that influence with the bigger companies, then it cascades down through the supply chain. How do you see the future, Luca? Are you seeing more take up of sustainable procurement? And if so, why? What's driving people these days to procure more sustainably?
Actually, I see, a couple of aspects. The first one is regulations, rules, something coming from outside the company. For instance, investors. Sometimes I met companies in which the investors are asking them to do something and make a commitment in sustainable management overall, and then it, let me say, goes down to procurement as well. And so the first part is regulation, rules, influence from external factors, investors as well, some rules of the European community regarding the reporting, for instance, or the sustainable financial, scenario. Those are external. From internal, I see an improvement of awareness of the top manager, of the CEO, of the board, in order to introduce a very structured CSR program or sustainable development program, which includes also the sustainable procurement, management, and it means re-engineering the process of the procurement organizations.
So the ISO 2400 standard, Luca, is nearly 5 years old now. Are you seeing it being used in Italy? Is it a useful tool? Does it need to be changed? Do we keep it, or is it just something that is unnecessary?
No, actually, as all the standards, even this is it is a guideline. It is not a standard which consider the certification as other standards, of course. But first of all, maybe it is not well known enough. So maybe one step is to, maybe to share and to promote the 2400 guideline more than we did in the past. Because, of course, when you talk about the standard to the buyers, they can be, reluctant or more distant from a pragmatic understanding. And so that's my suggestion. The second is that in many cases it applies to big multinational company rather than the small businesses. Maybe small businesses doesn't understand why they need to assess the procurement or to make changes based on the guideline. And that's my first, feedback to you.
Do you think that the guidance standard helps? Are there benefits in it being guidance as opposed to a certifiable standard, or should we change things in the future? Is a certificate going to be helpful?
Yeah, well, actually, I see that some cases I mentioned to our colleague when we did the report of the situation around the world. So a couple of companies in Italy, which are multinational companies, big companies, ask an external, a third party, a certification body to evaluate the work done based on the ISO 2400. So a sort of, it is not a certification, sort of validation coming from an external site, maybe is more requested by the big companies, no? I strongly believe that the ISO 2400 is really a very good tool to understand, first of all, your context and how you have to face, the gaps and also improve your management. So, but actually, I believe it's just question to inform, to promote, and to give the right information about the benefits coming from the application of the guideline.
Brilliant. Well, Luca, thanks very much for those insights. It's always great to hear from people, and particularly their career paths. And I guess a little bit like you, I started as a mechanical engineer and ended up in procurement, and I was never quite sure why. A lot of us, I think, don't necessarily make procurement as a first choice of a profession. It's something that we get into, and I think a little bit like you again, you go from kind of being the macho buyer to understanding that there are bigger things out there to think about.
Actually, Sean, if I can add, so at the last minute, one thing, when I started to work on sustainable procurement, I was very, very convinced that it was not only a benefit for my company, but it was, first of all, a benefit for my professionalism. So I think that the buyer needs to change his mind in order to, add something different, a different way of living your work, your job inside the company and even outside the company. So it's a change of your mindset too.
I think you're absolutely right, because actually, in my experience, if you look at most organizations in most parts of the world, do most of what they do through their supply chains. So how can procurement not be important in delivering on sustainability? It's in some sectors it's key. As you know, we do a lot of work in the construction sector, and main contractors subcontract 80% of their revenue, so that they don't actually do very much. They just integrate a lot of suppliers into a project plan to build a building or a railway or some infrastructure or whatever. So therefore, procurement people are probably the most important people to help to deliver on sustainability. And I think that's a great point to close on, because for those procurement people listening, both of us, Luca and I think both see the future of procurement professionals as being the gatekeepers of sustainable development. And that's so important. We need to learn the skills and, as you say, adopt a different mindset.
Yes, and even because, procurement function is the crossroads of other functions inside the company, research and development, logistics, production, marketing, communication. So procurement can have really a very important weapon, let me say, in order to change things, even across all the other functions in the company, the organization.
Brilliant. That's a great note to end on, I think, Luca. So thanks very much. Thanks for sharing your experience and your views with us. For more information, please do go to ISO2400.org, where there's lots of resources on sustainable procurement in multiple languages. There's a self-assessment tool that you can use, and tons of collaboration and opportunities to learn and to develop. So, Luca, thanks very much, and great to talk to you again.
Thank you to you, Sean, and looking forward to see you very soon. Okay,
thank you, Luca.
Take care. Ciao.
Ciao.
Thank you for listening to Sense and Sustainability, your podcast for sustainable supply chains. Do visit our website, ISO2400.org, for more information.